like that just kind of hit the nail on the recording just started. I feel like that just kind of hit the nail on the head. So we could also focus on Paticca Samupada again.
All right. Well, let me hit it with one more time. I have heard recently that that there is a Zen saying, perhaps not a koan, but the Zen is that the key to hell and the key to heaven is the same key. And that you have a choice. But upon reflecting about that, I said, wait a minute, the key is needed in hell because heaven has not been locked. It's unlocked. It doesn't need a key. It doesn't need a key. That hell needs a key. And I guess the reason for that is because hell is so full, it's crowded in there. And so they become selective as who they're going to let in because everybody wants in. But heaven is unlocked because it's almost empty. And the next point on that is that hell, that key, is a reason. In other words, you need a reason to get into hell, but you don't need a reason to get into heaven.
Not fully sure how to apply this metaphor.
Here's how. Look at it this way. When someone makes something hard, that hard now is a reason, and that unlocks the door, and you go straight into hell. Just by thinking that this is hard. Where in fact it's more of just an old habit. And every time that habit is in play, it thinks, oh, getting into heaven is hard. And by doing so, we immediately place ourselves into hell. Now, when we look at it from this position, we can see that a different set of words to use for heaven and hell, because heaven and hell are kind of extremes. But another way of looking at it is satisfaction versus dissatisfaction, or happiness versus unhappiness. I like satisfaction and dissatisfaction because that's pretty close to where people are. Right. That their hell is not a real hell, it's just dissatisfaction. Why is it unsatisfactory? Because it's hard. But hard is just a thought. But it's a common thought. It's a thought that you were given. When you were a little kid, a lot of people use the word hard. They knew it was the key to hell, but they gave it to you anyway. And so now you've been applying that same word, that same key over and over and over again throughout your whole life. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. This is hard work. Oh, I'd like to have that, but it's too hard. So the word hard is very much like the word try. A lot of people will use the word try. In fact, try is even more sinister because try's got failure built right into it. So mom says, I want you to have your room cleaned up by 4 o'clock. And the little girl says, well, I'll try, which means she has no intention of having it cleaned up by 4. but she might throw a couple of things around just to show her mom that she did something. And that little girl can wind up her whole life, living her whole life that way. Anytime anything is needed to be done, the answer is, I'll try, and then they make a failed effort at it.
Yeah, I feel like this.
You're using the word hard. Hard is not quite so much failure built into it. But if you think about it, this word hard and this word try is actually deeply buried, not as a word, but as a feeling. And that the feeling is an unsatisfactory feeling. And that we have the kind of feelings that we have by habit. This is what we mean by the Sita Sankara, that in Thai language, in the Pali, they translate that as jai, as opposed to manu. Manu would be the frontal part of the brain. The jai is the heart, or the seat of emotion, and that this stuff is stored not verbally, but it's stored as an emotion. And so in the practice of Anapanasati, the whole idea then is to get the mind in a state of satisfaction so that then we can watch when this unsatisfaction comes up. This attitude or this feeling that arise maybe with the thought of hard. And so in this regard, what we're going to do is give you a new guard, or you're going to be the guardian now over the word hard. With a second one on to try, because try is even worse than hard. It's even more tragic. Hard is just more banal, or banal, as they call it.
Yeah, I feel like these, or at least hard for me, are also, okay, that's a bit hypothetical now, but they might also be connected to a wish for someone else to sort of help me out of this. And it's so hard, I can't do it alone. You help me. And that in the past might have been my parents, my mom, for example. And that's a very good premise to live your life on.
That's very interesting that you would bring that. But in fact, you could say that the use of the word hard is in some ways a cry for help.
Yeah, and I want exactly. I want exactly.
And that attitude. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just said I want to get exactly out of that, but then I have the feeling again, oh, I can just get out of that by having someone's help, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of trying to getting out of dependence on others for yourself.
Well, it's not a matter of trying to get out of it. It's a matter of just doing it. It's actually easier to do than to reach out your arm. Why? Because reaching out your arm requires something physical. We're just talking about something to change in the mind. And the way to get started is by being on guard for that word hard. Anytime that you use it, in fact, you might want to get a clicker or a machine or something, or even take a tablet and piece of paper so that you can scratch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many times today have you used the word hard?
Yeah.
This is what we mean by that, because the word hard, in fact, is a statement of dissatisfaction. Now, let's go back to that issue about wanting help. Basically, I found that there are 3 ways of looking at doubt. One of the ways is doubt about whose fault it is or who can be the one who fixes this. Another kind of doubt is about one's ability to be able to do it. And the third doubt is about, is this the right way to go about doing it? Now, those normally come in layers. The first layer that, in fact, that you've just addressed is that you're not actually responsible for your pain and suffering. You're not responsible for it being hard. That you want mom to come help you out of it. And if you can convince her how hard it is, she'll come and help you. Only as time goes along, that face of mom gets placed upon many different things. Sometimes it's placed upon a sky god. Sometimes it's placed upon a teacher. But always the idea is, I cannot do it myself. It's too hard for me. I've been trying and I've been failing at it, and I want help to get out. That can come in one of two ways. Or you actually have, let us say, two directions to go. One of the directions, or you can stay stuck. A lot of people will stay stuck in that same place their whole life. But one of the possible ways to go is to recognize, for instance, in the system that is called within Christianity, not within Buddhism, but within Christianity, is the concept of a dark night of the soul. What that means is that the practitioner is depending upon God, that he has prayers about how hard it is. Look how hard he's tried, and he wants the mercy of God to come and help him. And sometime along the way, he's worked so hard and prayed so hard and asked so much that he comes to the position of, wait a minute, I've been doing this a whole lot more than anybody else I know, and God answers them. Why doesn't God answer me? God, why have you forsaken me? Look how hard I have tried.
Yeah,
I got both hard and tried at the same sentence. Look how hard I have tried. And they still feel like that they're not getting what they deserve or what they should want. And God ain't going to help them. This is what is then referred to as the dark night of the soul, which is actually a state of despair, deep despair, because I've already decided that it's too hard for me and I can't do it. And now, where is the Calvary? Where is Jesus riding up on a white stallion with a great big flag saying, I'm here to save you? Doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how long is it going to take for you to figure out that the only person who can fix your brain is you? No one else can do that. Mommy can't do it. So there's no reason to tell mommy or convince her how hard it is. Because you're doing is making yourself suffer by using the word hard. Ain't nobody going to help you. Nobody. I can smile at you. You can smile back. But if you can't remember to smile, then what's the point? In that regard, I'm not helping you even when I smile at you. That you're going to have to do this on your own. That's what, in fact, the second noble truth is really all about. The second noble truth, which we have been delving deeply into in the level of Paticca Samupada, is actually a teaching that has a major, major point to it. And that is, the source of suffering is in your own mind, in your own greed, in your own feelings, in your own not liking, in your own confusion, in your own doubt, and in your own ignorance and delusion. That's what the second noble truth is all about, is that first point of doubt.
Yeah,
this is one of the reasons why having some success at meditation is so valuable in eradicating that doubt. Yes, I can. This is not hard.
Yeah, I had
yes,
some
I
experience.
can. This is not hard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had some experiences like that on the cushion and off the cushion too. They kind of clung off, and then the old habits took over again, and
yeah.
I guess the
Your
energy.
job is to make sure those old habits don't take back over. Your job is to get yourself into a state of nice satisfaction and stay there.
What do you think is useful then concerning formal practice? Because right now I mostly just practice in everyday life, and when I was better at that, when I was
when you say you're practicing, what are you practicing?
Just like I was trying not to put too much pressure on myself, because that's kind of been a trap for me to fall into.
Okay.
So I always
pressure of
try
what?
to get myself
Getting something
out.
from the future. Is that right? What's the pressure? If you pressure hard enough, it'll bust the bag. Is that the idea?
Yeah, like I had that experience a while ago when I meditated 1.5 hours for a while, and I felt good about that. But then after like several months, it just became a burden, and I stopped quite rapidly again with it. And it became kind of like a chore. And I noticed now when I was feeling better that I automatically started sitting again more, just like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. Now the last
it's got nothing to do with time. It has to do with enjoyment.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it can help as a basis for your day to sit, to really dedicate some time to feeling good. But also, if I sit too long, then it turns out to maybe I go somehow deeper then, but it becomes hard because then boredom comes in and
okay, so now you know where the limit is, so you can draw it to a close. When it starts to become hard, then it's time to stop.
Okay, so shouldn't use that as a chance then to get myself out of that hardness again.
That's exactly why I'm saying to stop.
Okay. So really just focusing on enjoying that now.
Enjoying the moment. Can you come to a state of satisfaction? Do you feel like a winner? Do you feel successful? Do you feel like a champion? Or do you feel like it's hard? This is a major attitude change. It's a major feeling change. And this is why Anapanasati is so valuable in the practice of the figuring out how the mind works. And when we say mind, we're talking about both the actually all three kinds. You could even add a fourth if you want to look at it like that, because the body is a mind, the feeling is a mind, your ability to think is a mind, and that thinking quality actually uses language. This is the way that through primates, But then you've got something new. You've got something human, something extra. And that's the ability to see. And that seer then is the one who can manage these other things correctly rather than letting them operate from the way that they were operating, learned how to operate in childhood. And more or less, our feeling systems they can certainly change, but they're more or less fixed by the time of 6 or 7. This is through the developmental psychology. And then language is more or less set by the age of 12 or 13. But math skills, that's when the mind can take off. When the mind is fully developed, that's when one can learn math, when we can learn the sciences, when we can do the kinds of things that humans do that animals and reptiles cannot. But you feel the way that you learned to feel when you were a child. The question is, can you reprogram that feeling? The answer is certainly, because you have a choice at every moment about how you feel. And so within the practice of anapanasati, starting at the very beginning, when the mind wanders away, or at any particular point, at any time when we wake up, that's sati. That's the important one. As soon as sati arises, then we're actually experiencing the mind. Well, what are we going to do with that mind now that we're experiencing it? The first thing we're going to do is gladden it. Aha! I'm in the present moment now. Then you start working with the feeling and the sense of, this is champion material that I'm working with here. I can do this. And that gives the rapture or the piti in step 5. And then step 6 of anapanasati is the sukha. You come to a state of satisfaction. You've been able to do that before. You know you can do that. But then the doubts will come back. But the more you're able to get into that state of satisfaction, then the more often you will choose to feel like that you can do this, rather than coming from the old way of, this is hard and I need my mommy to help me. You don't need mommy to help you here. You need to remember to help yourself, because it's actually very easy to do. All you have to do is remember to do it. And so you get yourself into that attitude. And in this regard, much of the Eightfold Noble Path is already in play. We've got the right attitude, or the right view that we're going to come out of suffering. We got sati. We remember that we're going to come out of suffering, that we're going to stop making things hard and start making them actually nothing at all. They become easy automatically when we stop making them hard. And so that's then the next step is right noble effort. The right effort is the easy effort. The effort of, just drop it, just let it go, just be here now, just become a winner. And we practice this over and over and over again. I don't know what it is that you've been practicing, but this is what should be practiced: is right effort, right sati, right noble view, and right attitude. Along with the right attitude is the skill of gladdening the mind. The right attitude is to become a winner, to become a champion, to feel like a champion. That's what the word piti in the Pali is all about, is to feel like you could do it, feel successful. And with it comes a deep in-breath. I can do it. Generally, what happens in the movies, I've never seen this in real, but in the movies, when someone has been passed out and everybody thinks that they're dead or close to death or something, and then he is revived, the first thing the body does is take a really deep in-breath, coming back alive.
Yeah.
That's the way that you want to think about it, that you have been in hell, you have been suffering, you have been in pain, you have been in try hard. But with that deep in-breath that comes out of that, I'm alive. I am not in hell. And then that out-breath is then the satisfaction. It's a sigh. It's a wonderful, deep sigh of relief. And now that sukha. And that sukha is what we want to stay in and maintain that state that is free from hindrances, full with attitude of satisfaction and good feelings, and the intention or the right attitude is, I can do this and I'm going to continue to do it. So we become a guardian. And what we're guarding is a mind that's fit for work. And the guarding of the mind that's fit for work requires it to be fit for work in order to do that guarding. And so it runs in circles around itself like that.
Yeah.
And so the guard then, for right now, for you, is to start guarding on making things hard. Because when you start making things hard or thinking that they're hard or this meditation practice is hard, you have already taken that key word hard, slipped it into the lock, and opened the gates of hell.
Yeah.
And you have now become in the state of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, I've been having a pattern throughout my whole life so far of like starting things, being enthusiastic in the beginning and then stopping again. I guess a lot of people have that. Also makes me think that this heart will probably have been a thing that led me to at some point stop, because I thought, oh yeah,
That's the main problem with people learning how to do meditation correctly, is they make it hard.
right.
And they were trained from childhood that things are hard. You got to put in effort.
And
Hard effort to do a hard job. But this is easy effort to do an easy job. And what is the easy job to do? Stop making it hard.
It's beautiful.
Let us say that there was a very, very heavy object in the yard and you wanted to move it. And you couldn't move it by yourself because it was really a lot of work. You tried really hard. And so now you're planning on getting someone to go move that object out of your yard. The whole point is that the whatever it is in the yard that's so big and heavy, the only problem with it is that you want it out. That's the problem, is wanting it out. And if you could get rid of that, wanting to get it out, then the object, whatever that big heavy object is in the yard, is okay. That very big heavy object in the yard can, in fact, be an emotion. It can be a feeling. It is possible for one to be in a state of deep grief and enjoy it.
How do you enjoy that? By stopping calling it grief?
Well, that's a different topic, but I'll give it a little bit short news for you. And that is, anyone who you are dear to, anyone who is dear to you, you will lose them. And when you do, you will go through a state of grief. This is just natural. You've lost something that really matters to you. If your mom dies, if your dad dies, if you got a brother, if you got a wife or children, anytime anyone close to you dies, there will be grief. How are you going to handle it? You can handle that deep grief with joy. In fact, you could really get deep into that grief. But if you don't want the grief, then you push it off. You don't let the body do the grieving that it needs to do. And so you carry around unfinished business. Like the son who will not cry at his dad's funeral.
It sounds like another sort of happiness about the grief than a smiling, laughing happiness.
Yes, go ahead and grieve. You've lost something dear to you. Go ahead and get it out of your system. Say goodbye. Take on full responsibility for not saying goodbye when the guy was alive or whatever is going on. But grief is part of us. Every emotion we have is part of us. And we can learn it as a teacher. But if we're trying to get rid of it, then now we're making it hard.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of learning to be satisfied with the way things are, even when you're in a state of grief and you're feeling deep grief, let that grief be there. If you're in a state of anxiety, instead of trying to figure out a way of getting out of the anxiety by going and doing something, check out that anxiety, look at it. Deep breathe into it. Say, hello, Mr. Anxiety. I can handle you.
Mm-hmm.
And now the hard one. Look at that part of you that wants to make things hard.
Right.
And say, hello, Mr. Hardmaker. You want to make everything hard. And that one who wants to make everything hard is then giving you a kind of toughness. And that toughness then can be used. So we have to congratulate ourselves. In fact, even the self-preservation instinct, which winds up being the major issue, that we become selfish or that we try to preserve a self that's not in danger. And so we compete with others or we do things. But without that self-preservation instinct, we probably wouldn't have survived to today.
Mm.
So what we need to do is to make friends with all these various things inside, and we have to do that by seeing them directly and taking control over them so that they don't run our lives subconsciously anymore.
Yeah.
Now, this is a kind of a deep level. This is down at the level of the Sankara of when that stuff comes up, but it manifests itself in an experience that leads to feelings. And normally the feelings start off as, for example, when that anxiety comes up, we have the feeling of, I don't like it. We may not even be aware of that. When the anxiety comes up, the feeling is, I don't like it. And therefore, I have to think of something that needs to be done. Because if I can get something done, then this anxiety will go away. But a new way of doing it is say, oh no, let's look at the anxiety directly. Let's not try to figure it out. Let's just observe it. Let's breathe with it. Let's see if we can manipulate the exact feelings of it in the body. And so we begin to work with the anxiety at a different kind of level of feeling. We have to actually change our feelings about the deep emotions. Now, at that level of feeling, we look at it as three kinds. And these feelings arise at a point of contact when something impacts us. For instance, if that anxiety impacts us, even if it's subliminal, it's not a full-on panic attack, it's just something little, but still the feeling will be there of not liking it and wanting it to go away. Or if we do with the eyes and we see a pretty object, we see something that is intentionally attractive, then we are attracted to it. which means we like it. And the whole point about it being attractive is not only do I like it, but I want it. And that wanting it, then, if it remains ignorant and the wanting it becomes stronger because of a continual wanting, let's say you keep looking at that object and you keep liking it and you keep wanting it, now comes the idea or the thought of, oh, I have to have it. The kids will even go so far as to say, I can't live without it. This is the state that is called clinging. When I'm clinging to something as if it's so needed that I can't do without it. And yet, these things may happen unconsciously. We may not even know that this process is going on. Or we may only see bits and pieces of it. An example of that is the teenage boy who is in a great deal of pain that they call lovesick. He's in love with a girl, but he's afraid of rejection, so he won't tell her that he loves her. And if he does, he knows that his love for her, which is nothing but lust, is not really appealing to her anyway. And so he winds up in a great deal of pain and suffering, especially every time he sees that girl. And he sees her every time he thinks about it. He's recreating mental images about it and causing himself a great deal of suffering. Where, in fact, at this point in time, the way that he's feeling and the way he's operating, for sure, he cannot have her. And all he has to do is stop wanting her. All he has to do is stop the wanting. Well, how can he do that? Is by first off recognizing that he does like her. Acknowledge that feeling. Oh, I really, really, really like her. And because I like her, I want her. But he does not have to want her. He can say, okay, I like her, but since she is too much work, too hard to get, I don't really want her. I could just stay at the level of liking her. Now, he does that a lot with, for instance, movie stars. The young men really, really like the movie star, but very few of them want her. And those guys who want her sometimes will drive all the way across the country and do really crazy things because he wants her so badly. So the beauty alone does not create the wanting. It just creates the liking. And it's up to individual people, each one of us, if we can see that liking as merely liking, then we can choose whether we're going to use it or to let it use us, to let it take over. And so this is where we're coming from. This is where that frontal cortex of the mind, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa calls it wisdom at the point of contact. That even though the anxieties or the emotions or whatever it is arisen through the subconscious mind into contacting us, the actual point then is this point of feelings arise. And there's normally three kinds of feelings. The feeling of I like it, the feeling I don't like it, and then the third one is a confused feeling that's not sure whether I like it or not. And that's how it's described in the suttas. But when Western people read that, they think that it's a feeling of a neutral feeling. It's neutral because I don't like it and I don't not like it. But a neutral feeling is basically no feeling at all. This feeling is a strong feeling, but it comes up in the sense of confusion. I don't know whether I like her or not. Imagine that you were, let us say, in some sort of military operation. Perhaps you were part of a Bedouin Arab group sitting very, very high up on a hill, and down below in the valley you see a dark figure on a horse moving. When you see that, you want to know whether you like it or not. Is this enemy or is this friend? Is this a woman that's beautiful, or is this my enemy, or is this my daddy? We don't know. And because we don't know, we want to find out. This is curiosity. It's based in doubt. This is a feeling that can be extraordinarily valuable and useful for you if you use it wisely, and it can destroy a person through their doubt, their confusion, destroy their lives. Maybe not kill them, but at least they're sit there in a state of confusion and doubt.
Yeah.
But when we add something, go ahead.
Yeah, last time in the end of the talk, we touched upon if I let go of these plans for the future, which kind of conceptualize, I want this, I want that. These two things exclude each other, so I'm kind of suffering in between because I don't want to let go of each of them. But if I try to let go, I came to this point of disorientation, so I don't know what to like or how to behave anymore. Was that sort of this confused?
Yes. In fact, that's exactly what we're talking about. That you're becoming familiar with this. Everybody has these feelings of confusion, but you're beginning to see it. This feeling of confusion can be your friend. That in fact, it can become your curiosity that you want to know. Because basically, you want to know what you need to know in order to stop wanting things and to stop hating things. And so this is a feeling that's between hating and loving, but we use it in the state of confusion. Eventually, you're going to come to understand that the more you know, the less you know. The more you understand, then the more you recognize out there that there's more and more and more things to understand, and there's no limit to it. And that's okay. It's all right that I don't know. Ultimately, ignorance will be there, and that you want to stay in a state of not knowing. That not knowing is almost like emptiness itself, that everything becomes empty. Everything becomes a mystery. Everything becomes enjoyable. But we use this for curiosity. So the curiosity is going to be, in this sense, can you become a winner? Can you take over your own mind? Can you do this? Can you eradicate that quality of the doubt? Because that's where the real doubt is can you do it? Not whether mommy can do it for you or not, but can you do it? And when you come to the conclusion, yes, I can do it. Yes, I can find a point of satisfaction in my life, and I can learn to maintain that state of satisfaction, so that I don't fall into a state of dissatisfaction. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, when I see things that I like, I know that I like them, but I don't like them enough to take me out of the state of satisfaction that I'm in. If I start wanting things, then that means I'm dissatisfied with the way things are. And by wanting them, I'm creating suffering. So the very things then that are hard, the underlying quality is that you're wanting something. If you recognize, oh, I want something, then you can say, wait a minute, I'm satisfied with the way things are. So if I like something, then I want it. If I want it really strongly, then I've got to have it. For instance, my brother comes and asks me for money, and I've got my wallet there. If he asks me for money, I'll either give it to him or I don't. If I don't, it's because I want it. He wants my money and I want my money, and I'm going to cling to it strongly enough that I'm not going to give it to him. So now I'm in conflict with my brother because I have something that he wants and I'm not going to give it to him because I want it too. So there may be a better way of dealing with that, because we've almost certainly created suffering because of my clinging to the money. So let's look at this clinging. That in fact, the Buddha talks about there are 4 modes of clinging. The first one and most deepest one, and the most difficult to deal with until we're ready to deal with it, is personality view. Now, this is actually 2 different levels of personality view. One is called the personality view, and the other one is called the personality doctrine. Normally, it's the doctrine that we have to deal with first, the doctrine of a self. Now, when we say a view of the self, personality view, that would just simply be simple selfishness in this present moment. This is my money. Okay. But a doctrine of a self is a shared teaching about self and what the nature of self is. For instance, Christianity has a doctrine of the self. They call it the soul, and it belongs to God, and God's going to mess with it as he pleases. Islam has also, Allah is merciful. He's merciful to Arabs, but nobody else. And so they have a doctrine of self. Every religion has a doctrine of the self. And what the right view is to give up all doctrines about a self. And so this is the very first thing. And this is the reason why we want to practice Paticca Samupada is with this sense of anapanasati, is because once we see this thing that we call clinging, we recognize there, in order to do the clinging, there's got to be a clingor. Something is clinging to, otherwise the clinging wouldn't happen. What is it that's doing the clinging itself? This is that selfishness, the self that arises. And we begin to see, wait a minute, we may not be able to do anything about this self that arises, that just arose when my brother asked me for money. But rather it does attack the doctrine of a self, because the doctrines of the self always have a permanent self that's permanent and even sometimes everlasting. But what we begin to do is begin to see, it's only when clinging occurs that this self arises. That if there is no clinging, then there is no self to do the clinging. That means that the self is a much deeper thing than we thought. That the Christians are trying to make it really simple and really easy, where in fact, no, this is something deeply buried inside of a human being that does take over from time to time, and that we can identify this as the self-preservation instinct, that these are instinctual things built right into the DNA. This is not some God-given thing. This is something that mom and dad gave you. It's built right into the genes, the self-preservation instinct. And that when the self is attacked, when we feel under attack in any way, then it's the self that feels that attack, and that selfishness or that self-preservation instinct that is actually the source of the feelings. For instance, the feeling of fear. Where does the feeling of fear come from? Well, it comes out of a sense of danger that this part of the mind experiences as danger and brings fear as the feeling. If animals did not have the feeling of fear, then they would have all gotten stomped or kicked or dead, eaten long ago, and there would be no more humanity. There would be no more animal life. If the animals didn't had no fear, if every animal was fearless, they'd all be dead. Self-preservation keeps us alive, and what keeps us alive is fear. So fear is a very valuable component. Unfortunately, fear runs a lot of people's lives. They go around being afraid of things when there's no danger at all, because they're in the habit of being fearful.
Yeah, so if you try to drop clinging more and more, or to more and more things, and try to drop fear, how does that impact your life then? Because I really recognize this fear of my life will spiral out of control and I'll land in the gutter and if I don't.
All right. Let me ask you this. Can you enjoy the gutter? Could you possibly, if you were in the gutter, could you enjoy it?
It's hard to say. I've never lived in it.
That's a kind of a hard one, huh? Okay, because the fear of the gutter comes up.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the point then. Can you become satisfied in the gutter? Because if you can become satisfied in the gutter, then what's there to be afraid of? Why fear a gutter?
Yeah,
When you stop seeing life as gutter, because it's not really. Even the guy who is physically in the gutter can stand up and step out of the gutter.
It seems a lot harder than when you get more comfortable and supportive surroundings.
Right. So let's talk about that. And I'll suspend my four modes of clinging, and we'll get back to that in a moment. But the first thing that we have to find out, for instance, is what is your bottom line? Gutter is below your bottom line. I can see that. The Buddha talks about it in the sense of the four requisites. Every monk in the time of the Buddha had to have four requirements. The four requisites are adequate housing, adequate clothing, adequate food, and adequate medical attention. Now, surprisingly not, there's a whole lot of people in the world who do not have one or more of those requirements. But if you can think of it like that, all you have to do is get yourself up to basic requirements of just enough housing. Now, in the tropics, a porch is adequate housing. All you need is something overhead. That's all you need. But a tree, in many cases, would serve that, especially when it's not raining. In times of rain, then we need more adequate shelter. But when it's not raining, we don't need much of any shelter at all in the tropics. Same thing with Northern Europe. There are days when you don't need any shelter at all, but people still stay sheltered. Why? Because they're in the habit of it. But there are times when you don't need the shelter. There are times when you don't need so much clothing, but you do need adequate clothing, and in cold climates, you need more of it than in warm climates. But there will always be a need for some amount of clothing. In the old days, before polyester, clothing had to be replaced quite often, especially in the rainy season. That clothing will rot even when you hang it out to dry. It don't dry, and it rots. But now with polyester and with modern equipment, clothing will last a long time. The secret is don't wash it. Or if you do wash it, don't wash it with soap. And if you do wash it, don't beat on it with like a machine would do. But if you very gently wash clothes, get the stench out of it and whatnot, then you can wear the same pants for 10, 15 years. No problem. The next one is adequate food, that we have to plan on getting an adequate food. And the next one is adequate medical attention. So if we have these basic 4 qualities, then that's all that's necessary. And yet most of Western life is all about wanting more and more and more and more and more. More clothes. And so the average closet worldwide, in fact, has more clothes than people need. How many shirts do you need? You need one. That's the one you're wearing. And you can take it off and wash it out, put it back on and let it dry. You only need one. However, it would be good if you're traveling and whatnot to have as many as 3. That way you can have one that's in the laundry, one that's drying, and one you're wearing. And every 3 days you change shirts. And yet when people pack to go on vacation, how many shirts do they take with them?
A lot more.
A bit more, exactly. Sometimes they don't even wear all the shirts that they take on vacation. So we have to begin to look at things from a minimal amount. That in fact, even though adequate medical attention is there, in Thailand, monks tend to not do a lot of doctor stuff. They tend not to do when they need it, they will. And yet, monks tend to live to a ripe old age. Very ripe, 100 years or so sometimes. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was 87. Ajahn Po is actually currently now 87. He's going strong. And so they live for a long time, even though they don't have a lot of medical attention. Sometimes they do get what they need. So when you have your adequate amounts, for instance, if you've got a nice tarp and a good piece of plastic sheeting, then a gutter may not be so bad. But you're looking at it from the position of, oh, poor me, oh, what will become of me if I don't do this and if I don't do that? Well, that's the society that's been lying to you. In fact, you don't have to do very much. Most of the time, people are doing most of the things they do because of habit and because of their greed of wanting more and more and more. But when you become satisfied with the way you are, and you've got your basic requirements, then what else do you want? Other than to share your joy with others. That's all there is to do, is just to sit on your porch and job on about how wonderful things are if you'd only pay attention. So getting back now to the 4 modes of clinging.
And just to give a frame of reference, I have like 10 or 15 minutes more, then I gotta go to work.
Okay, well, I think we can cover the 4 modes of clinging in that time. Basically, the 4 modes of clinging are very similar to the 4 basic instincts that I learned in high school. The self-preservation instinct, the instinct of procreation, the instinct of nesting, and the instinct of territory. These are the ways that we've taught, and all of those, if you look on the internet, you can find that those are generally referred to as the basic. But Buddha already knew about these things 2,500 years ago. The first one is the self-preservation instinct, which means that we will become afraid and try to protect the self in times when there is no reason to be afraid. No need to protect the self. Even if somebody's yelling at you, he's probably not going to kill you. Therefore, even if he's yelling at you, why should you be afraid? You just say, hey, man, I hear you yelling. Look at what you're doing to yourself, but you're not making me afraid. I can only do that. But because he understands his self-preservation instinct, he thinks that yours is going to operate exactly the way that his does. And if he yells at you, you will become afraid and therefore do what he tells you to do. But you don't have to meet things with fear. You can be wise to that fear. You can say, yes, I do have fear. The guy's yelling, I have fear, but I don't care. I mean, it's not that I want to get rid of my fear by doing what he tells me to do. I can come back to a state of satisfaction and be satisfied with my fear. Like, okay, you're making me afraid. So what?
Okay.
So that's the first one, this self-preservation instinct. The second one, we can look at that. The procreation instinct is definitely dealing with sexuality. But the important thing is it's dealing with sensuality. And that within the Western context, because anything that's sensual is sexual, they mix the two together and therefore miss the big picture. Sexuality is definitely there, but it's not the main issue. The main issue is all of the behaviors and all the things that we do that have to do with the material world that makes us safe and secure. An example would be having a mate, having a wife will make life a little easier, and there's something deep inside that we know that. But the wife is not necessary for my security. But now the wife, in that regard, becomes not what we thought she was, a sexual object. She becomes a material object, something that's going to help my household and to take care of my affairs and do all of that kind of stuff. So it's materialistic. Materialism, then, is the real issue. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about that's actually the primary issue with the world right now, is everyone is materialistic. We want more money, we want more gold, we want more this, we want more that, because we think that we're going to be secure and happy if we get all of those material goods. And I can see where that comes from. It comes right back from the time when humans were there to inspect the remnants of a carcass. After the wolves, dogs, lions, or whatever, jackals got it, there is still marrow inside those bones, and only the human knows how to get that out. How do we do that? By taking a big rock, and eventually we tie a stick to that rock, and we have a club or an axe. And so this is how material goods came. Material goods come in two forms that are almost unrecognizably intertwined. That is, one a tool, and the other one is a weapon. That axe that we cut the tree down with can be an axe that can be used in warfare. But more to the point, any time that I'm using that tool, for instance, to chop the tree down, I'm using it as a weapon against that tree. And so our material possessions are wrapped back up with these four primary requisites that we just talked about. Just enough clothing, just enough food, just enough shelter, and just enough adequate medicine is all we need. Axes, knives, tools, hammers, all of that kind of material goods, we don't need those. We don't need those things to live. That all we need to live is adequate food, adequate shelter, adequate clothing. And yet you go into the average Joe Blow's house, especially in the United States, and he's going to open that secret room or that bedroom or whatever like that, and it looks like an army just landed. Guns galore. Why? Because he's not dealing with his fear. If he were unafraid, he would need no weapons.
Yeah, it's often hidden under this very sort of macho or patriotic layer of I'm also doing this for other people or for us, for the group. We're defending ourselves.
Defending, that's the whole point. It doesn't matter whether we're doing it for the group or not. It's the fact that I feel that not only I, but my entire everybody is under attack. And so our material possessions are used for protection. It makes us feel safe. It makes us feel secure. The rich man has the idea that the more money he has, and the more he's able to control things, and the more secure he's going to be. There's actually a very interesting novel that was written about that called the Prince and the Pauper, to where a young boy who was a poor boy, he was a scavenger kid, they discovered that he was the long-lost prince. And so they took him to the palace, they tried to train him, they put him in all of the fine gear, and they gave him a little armed guard to follow him around everywhere he wanted. And he wound up hating being the prince because he was so valuable. He had so much money, but it became a prison to him. And so he would rather go back out on the street. He escaped. He went back to be the pauper again. But kids who were born into wealth, heirs to wealth, they don't understand that. They have been trained in that wealth and they think that they need it. And the more wealth they have, the more secure they're going to be. And so a very, very small amount, tiny amount of the population winds up getting all of the money because they keep taking it from everybody because they feel insecure. If these rich people felt secure in and of themselves, then they wouldn't need the greed to go get all of that money. And so in that way, the very, very wealthy, the very, very rich, the very, very powerful, the very, very political are generally people who are in a great deal of suffering.
I can remember talking to my parents once about that I know a monk who just decided to leave his monastery and travel around without any real support. And I could see like the fear in my mom's eyes about that I may at some point do that. And that this was really something scary to my parents, I think.
Okay, let's take that side trip for just a moment. In Asia, none of the Thai women would feel that way about her son because she knows that throughout his travels, wherever he goes, there is going to be women just like her, Thai moms, who take care of their boys. And so no Thai woman is going to have that. She knows that wherever her son goes out on Pendabat or out on Tudong, that he's going to be in friendly territory and he's going to be well taken care of. Instead of robbing him, nobody's going to rob a monk. He's got nothing to take. He's got, at best, about $5 worth of stuff, and most of that is his robe, and those are not worth stealing. And so he's safe. There's nothing to take. So the robbers are not. In fact, if he comes across a group of robbers, they'll probably point out, "Oh yeah, I'll go that way. You could, that's the place tomorrow morning. You can get some food at the village." So now let's take that and put that monk in the United States or in Australia or someplace in Germany or whatnot. He's going to choose what time of year he's going to be out because he doesn't want to be out in the dead of winter. But during the summertime, it's good that he will be out. But when he's doing that, he's going to be taking plans, and he's probably even going to be guided to the point of these people in this house know that he can be expected today because they're calling around. In fact, you wind up having 50 to 100 people tracking that monk everywhere he goes. Good little Buddhist people. In Thailand, they don't have to do that, but some will. But in America, it's all arranged in advance. There's been one guy who's done it. I think he's still on it. in America, and one guy's already gone all the way across to Australia. But it was a planned routine, that he wasn't going out into great danger, real danger, that the dangers were taken care of before he left. But in the time of the Buddha, they didn't have all of that. There was some danger out there. They didn't have all of the lions killed, and all the pythons and all the cobras were out there sharing the forest with the monks. But there are very few stories about monks getting killed by wild animals. There's a couple, but not many. And so that's the thing about your mom, then, is you can rest assured that if you do that, it will be well planned and well done. That you're not walking intentionally into a gutter, so to speak. So now back to the 4 modes of clinging. The 4 modes of clinging have this, let's go right to the nesting instinct. In order to stay in a nest, you've got to follow the rules of the nest. In other words, if there's danger around, they want the kids to be quiet. So they'll take care of the kids to keep them quiet in the nest. I'm thinking about now a monkey nest, and they've got a nest where there's 5, 6, 7 monkeys in that nest in the tree. Tomorrow morning, they'll get out of that nest, and they may never go back to that nest. They'll go make another one. But the important thing was that they were nesting together. The same thing is true with wolves in a wolf's den, is that they nest together. It's done for protection. But you got to get along inside that nest. Well, now human beings have made the entire planet Earth their nest, which means the human population's nest rules are localized, but they're all over the place. And this group has this rule, and that group has that rule, and this group over here has other rules, etc., like that. But within that group, you've got to follow the rules, or you're going to get kicked out of the nest. In other words, it becomes a survival issue. Because it's a survival issue, children attach themselves to the right ways of doing things, and as adults or teenagers, sometimes they rebel against it. But most of the rules they do follow. This is called in the Buddha's world, Silabbata Paramasa, attachments to rites, rules, and rituals, when in fact what you're really looking for is freedom. They were going to give you a new rule. That new rule is dukkha, dukkha, nirodha, or satisfaction and dissatisfaction. If you live by the rule of unsatisfactory and satisfactory, then you'll deal with the police and the whole world in a much better, superior way than if you follow all the detailed little rules. In fact, everybody's got so many rules, you don't even know what they all are. They say the IRS has 80,000 pages of rules, and I don't know one of them. In other words, I know the one right word. I know only one rule about the IRS in America, and that is do not file. That's the only rule. Why? Because if you file, then they know you, and now they've got you. But if you don't file, they've got nothing. So that's the nesting instinct. The territorial instinct manifests itself in the humans, not as the actual, you hear the dogs out barking, that's because somebody came into their territory and they don't like that. Humans are like that too. We do not like to be invaded. We do not like our nest or our territory invaded, especially by somebody we don't know. This is an instinctual thing that gives rise to tribalism, racism, bigotry, us versus them. This is what sport teams are all about. Manchester and Liverpool. They hate each other. Why? Well, that's the whole point. It's all about how violent can we get about our footy, because it's our footy, not their footy. Football. So, this is what is the tribal instinct. We become very tribalistic, and this tribalism can be easily manipulated through fear. The politicians say, oh, we're under attack. Everybody be afraid. Everybody join the army. Or the politicians will say, that party over there are doing terrible things to you. Aren't you afraid? Here, come vote for us. And so this tribalism is used as an instinct to raise up those instinctual feelings of fear. Everything winds up coming back to a survival issue. Materialism, we're gaining that to feel secure. We follow the rules of our nest, because if we get out of the nest, we get into danger. The territory is also under the influence and in operation with this self-preservation instinct. So the four modes of clinging, with the clinging that we have, another way of looking at this tribalism is clinging to views. Any view that we have can be seen as a tribalistic view, and that the way that we can do this is to stop holding any views at all. Why? Because any views that you have will ultimately be unsatisfactory. For instance, if you identify with, as a belief, if you identify with the political organization, then when that political organization wins, you feel good, and when they lose, you feel bad. And it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Do you want to go with that up and down and up and down, or do you want to be separated from it and be satisfied whether the Republican Party is up or down? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I have to
go. I know. All right. Well, we'll finish this at a later time. We've gotten right into it. Okay. Yeah. The four modes of clinging are instinctual. And the base note of it is fear. And so you start in fact, fear expresses itself in many ways. One of them is anxiety. Another way of expressing fear is with anger. In other words, how can anybody get angry if they're not already afraid? If they're completely fearless, then they don't get angry. So the fear is the base, the bottom line, the deep emotion that keeps us alive. And your job as a good little Buddha is to become fearless. You're a lion. Roar. You are not afraid, not of death, not of politics, not of the IRS, nothing. You're not even afraid of it being hard.
All right. This has been really great. Glad I called.
I'm glad you did.
So, yeah, I'll be gone over this weekend, but yeah, I'll see beginning of next week.
Okay, I'll see you Monday or Tuesday then.
Great.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
I already have, except it's a big zero. I'm having a great, big, wonderful zero.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.